The sea is calm tonight. The tide is full. The moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of England stand, glimmering and vast, out in the tranquil bay. Come to the window, sweet is the night air. Only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land, listen, you hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling at their return up the high strand, begin and cease, and then again begin with tremulous cadence slow, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. Sophocles, long ago, heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. The sea of faith was once, too, at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its melancholy, long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Ah, love, let us be true to one another, for the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night.
Jonathan, Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach, really one of the most wonderful poems, I think, in the English language. It ends our first week. Why did you choose this particular poem?
Yeah, well, partly because it's, I think for me, as for you, it's a favourite poem. It's a poem that I've lived with and have held on to at stressful times ever since I first read it at school when one of those wonderful English teachers introduced me to it. But I think it's a good ending point because it's a slightly longer, more complicated and more meditative poem with many dimensions to it compared with the other ones we've looked at. The other short poems we've looked at, and which I'd encourage learners to learn by heart and hold with them as they go through life. They're like little oases, like the poems on the Underground. This poem is a kind of oasis. It has some of these characteristics of the achievement of calm through imagery, through regular rhythm, through rhyme. There are rhymes in the poem. It takes a little more work to find out where they are because it's not written in just stanzas of 4 lines like the other poem. It's in verse, what we call verse paragraphs, but the rhymes are much less obtrusive. But there is still also this regular rhythm, which is very much picking up on the rhythm of the sea. But it's also a poem of ideas. It's got a reference to the ancient Greek philosopher Sophocles, and it's got this idea of the sea of faith. Matthew Arnold, writing in Victorian times, writing at a time when a lot of the old religious certainties were being called into question, when Darwin's theory of evolution was causing a great deal of trouble for religious belief, as were the geological discoveries of the time, the discovery that the earth was not invented in 7 days, the way the Bible said, but that there was this huge sense of geological time. These were very troubling ideas for pious Victorian men and women. And what Arnold says in this poem is the old certainties of faith are ebbing away. So what we've got to hold on to is love. So he's by the sea at Dover, looking out on a moonlit night. It's a clear night, so he can just see the twinkle, the glimmer of lights across on the French coast. And he's speaking to his lover, his beloved, in the room and saying, hold on to love in dark times.
I was going to ask you about the personal circumstances. I seem to remember, was it his wedding night? Am I right in thinking this? When I was taught it at school, he was on the eve of his wedding with his wife. Let us be true, our love. I mean, it feels, it's very personal. It's very, and although the metaphor of the sea and the sea of faith, it's very striking, and it's talking about big things. However, there's something that, to me, it just still feels like I'm eavesdropping in, that it just feels very personal, like I'm almost on that honeymoon with them. I've always felt that when I read that poem.
Yeah, I mean, there's a slightly more complicated answer to the question, because although poems often seem incredibly natural, a lot of poems actually are thought and rethought and revised over time. So actually we're not absolutely certain about the composition or history of Dover Beach, but it does seem that it was begun at that special time, but then added to, revised, rewritten, and not actually published for many years thereafter. Poems capture moments, but they require craftsmanship to create them, which may last over a period of years.
Do you know, it reminded me a little bit of Philip Larkin's and Arnold too, when you were talking about, there's something about the way you were talking about it when that beautiful poem about the lovers, the tombstone, and they're holding each other's hands, all that will survive of us is love. Do you think there's a similar sentiment?
I think absolutely there's a similar sentiment, and I think again, you know, sort of thinking about our theme this week of poetry as stress management. To everybody, we hope at some point in their lives have experienced love of one kind or another, and to use a poem to take you away from your difficult times into a memory of love, a memory of precious times, whether it's a wedding night or whether it's simply walking on a beach with a friend or remembering the first time that you looked out to the sea when you were a child. These are very, very precious sort of anchors for us as we go through life, as we confront what Matthew Arnold calls the darkling plain, where the confused armies clash by night.
And does it matter, do you think, if sometimes we can read a poem and feel a bit intimidated by references to ancient times or the Greek philosophers, but it seems to me that I never worry too much about understanding every line. Sometimes I think, not to sound namby-pamby, but sometimes you do have to feel it. And I think about reading a poem over and over again, or going off to YouTube to see somebody else reading a poem, or we talked earlier about different ways of reading The Lake I Live In's Free. There are different ways of reading. Do you think, is there anything to be gained by not worrying too much about over-intellectualising or not understanding?
Absolutely. It really doesn't matter whether you know what on earth he's going on about when he says Sophocles heard it on the Aegean long ago. I agree. It does go back to that sort of sense of poetry as a kind of verbal music. Words are so powerful. And I think reading it aloud, or as you say, listening to others reading it aloud, it's a great exercise to go to YouTube and just find different readings of it. There's a wonderful actor who calls himself Tom of Bedlam, who reads lots and lots of poems on YouTube, and his reading of Dover Beach is absolutely
exquisite. He's got a
exquisite.
fantastic voice.
He's got a great voice.
Beautiful,
slightly northern voice.
Gravelly northern voice. I love him. I mean, that would be something that I think our learners would really like, reading listening to Tom O'Bedlam reading Dover Beach.
But then why not try reading it yourself? You know, a lot of us now have computers that with a built-in microphone. Read it and upload it onto YouTube yourself, and we'll have all sorts of different voices.
And don't be scared of it. I think don't be scared of a poem that you might seem intimidating, because it doesn't. It's things like the rhythm, the rhyme, the incantation. They are the things that can slow us down, even if we don't fully understand it in our intellectual minds.
Exactly, and especially as we read it aloud. I've talked quite a bit technically about rhythm this week, but the rhythm, the basic rhythm of English poetry, it is the rhythm of the heartbeat, but it's also the rhythm of conversational English. And simply by reading it aloud, you'll find that rhythm, and the poetry will do that work for you. So just as that poem begins, "The sea is calm tonight," we hope that by the time you've read it, you will be calm